All right, welcome to Built with Grit. I'm your host and strategic partner in cost reduction, Luis Fernandez, and today we are joined by Mason Harris, the Chutzpah guy. But before we get into that, if you're a fan of inspiring people and informative content, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do. So go ahead and hit that like button with some chutzpah. And with that, Mason, how you doing, my friend?
I am doing well. And Louis, you're pronouncing this correctly, chutzpah, which tells me that you're a member of the tribe. Right there. I know it already. You have a personality that leads you to take risks, to be bold, to
Mm,
turn bad things into good things. These are things we'll explore, I hope, during this interview.
for
But
sure.
these are all aspects, characteristics of chutzpah. Aha, so I got you
You
because
got
I'm
me.
not Christian
Yeah.
and I'm not Mormon.
Right. Well, yeah. But,
Um,
we came from those
but
roots, right?
but I'm fortunate to be in a marriage that seems like multiple wives. I don't know where to go with this.
Oh, see, you're
Oh,
in bigger
now
trouble
I'm
than
in
I am.
trouble.
Yeah.
Now
See, this is, yeah. All right. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about what chutzpah is?
well, great question. And I'm going to turn it around
Mm,
because I've written the book on chutzpah literally now.
okay.
So I have answers. But for our listeners, for our viewers, for the people who are going to be sharing this YouTube video with tens of thousands of their friends, I'd like you to start thinking in this too. So I'm going to ask you a question, which, again, our viewing audience, think about how you would answer this as well. What is chutzpah to you? How might you define it? Are there some synonyms that come to mind? What are the first things that come to your head? And don't worry about being right or wrong.
Mm. So, I think it's when you originally signed up for the podcast, I thought, just from my understanding of what it means, I thought, well, this is great because it is certainly analogous. I can pronounce chutzpah, but not analogous. Uh,
It's spelled the same way, analogous and analogous. So we're good.
okay.
So,
The point was that it's very similar to what we do here. When I talk about building with grit and having these interviews with these people, and I've said it in multiple different podcasts, that every service or product that you exchange money for, behind it was somebody who took a risk, a financial one or a time one. They put a lot of heart into it. They believed in this product and they went out of their way with a lot of boldness and a lot of effort and sweat and probably some arguments at home at night as well, to bring this thing that you're spending 7 8 maybe $1,000 on, whatever it is, right? There's that that's I chose the word grit. I think about it now, in the context of this conversation, and I feel like we're talking about similar aspects and similar topics, when you say chutzpah, that kind of what brings it into me.
grit is a great word. You also mentioned bold. Perseverance is implied because of the grit. The arguments at home and how to get through those. These are all correct. In my research and the interviews that I did, I must have had at least 40 examples, words. The stories are way more than 40
Hmm.
about chutzpah. So you are exactly on target. Is chutzpah good or bad?
um, so okay, we yes, that's the the one word.
Well, I'm glad I could pin you down on that. Seriously, because that'll help. Thank you, everybody. It's time to finish up.
I could see how you could use the same boldness, courageousness, grit, perseverance, all of these different things in a negative light to achieve negative ends. Because it takes all of that to reach into my pocket and pull my wallet out. Um, I don't think that we should laud that or praise it. But yeah, I think you could go either way on this one.
And I think your answer is correct. That's what the research has shown me. And I'll get to that actually very quickly. But again, for you and for the people who are watching, on a scale of 1 to 100, one being no chutzpah, 100 being, wow, that person, she or he or they, that's chutzpah, that organization, that individual, where would you put yourself?
Where would I put myself? I don't know, probably somewhere in the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd probably be a lot higher if I wasn't married. Uh,
Actually, your being married, I would argue, is an example of chutzpah. But
uh,
we'll go there later.
but see, Mason, I used to jump out of airplanes with the army. Okay, and I joined with the intent of going to the front lines and chasing down Osama bin Laden. That was my deal. I joined after 9/11, and always searching for like the next most riskiest thing to be closer and closer to the front lines and the tip of the spear. After getting married, I feel like I went down a gear, maybe two, right? So
So, thinking about that first, thank you sincerely for your service. You, all of your colleagues, the men and women who defend this country, there's no way we can all thank you enough.
mm.
In regard to jumping out of airplanes, on the one hand, into enemy territory, or being married, I don't know which one's more chutzpah, but that's not where we're going here anyway. I've been married over 30 years, and I would not change more than 100 things. Oh,
I wasn't ready for that one.
well, I would hope not. I just wrote it.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
that's good.
In all of your experiences, and this includes growing up, business, military, who might be somebody, it could be a person, could be a company, could be a family member, would be a great ideal of chutzpah for you?
Ooh, um, well, I'm going to. I'll start with my grandfathers and my father. So my family, my parents were born in Cuba, um, and so my grandfathers, uh, both of them fought with they fought with Castro and against him later. So in the beginning, when he was
Oh,
not a communist, they fought against that regime, and
right.
then when he became communist, they both fought against him. um, my dad's dad was actually arrested and put into a work camp. Um, he had been the doctor for Castro's group in La Sierra Maestra, which is the mountain range where they were hiding out. He had been their doctor, and really interesting story. I could probably talk about him for several hours, but he was imprisoned in this camp, and it's like they starve them and work them, and they're basically working you to death. And
Yeah.
him and a couple buddies decided to escape, and so they built a raft and escaped in cover of darkness, leaving everything behind and coming to the United States literally with nothing, truly, absolutely nothing.
Hmm.
Um, and then building a medical practice in Puerto Rico, and eventually moving to Miami. Um, and then my dad, he was 14 and he got arrested in Cuba because he argued with his professor about communism in Cuban history.
Hmm.
Um, and my grandmother went to go pick him up. And when she came out of the jail, she was crying and hailed down a cab. And cabs in Cuba stop until they're full. And there was a lady in there already. This lady was Mexican. And she was listening to the story and asked my grandmother what was going on. She told her, she said, "Well, my last name is Fernandez. I can say that he's family and I'll bring him to Mexico." And so they exchanged information, and that's how my dad got out of Cuba. But when his father found out, he had been abused as a child by some nuns, and so he did not want his son to live with this lady, but he did understand the need for the boy to get out of Cuba. So my dad was 14 alone, living in a halfway house in Mexico. Um, I can't imagine like what I was doing at 14 to be finding a job and saving money to get to the
Right.
US. Like that's just wild to me.
Couple of interesting things. One, when we get into the 8 behaviors of chutzpah in my model, I think we can talk a lot about your family and which of the ones apply.
Yeah.
And we're going to be amazed. And that's what I hope people can take away from today is that the characteristics, the behaviors we're going to speak about apply across industry,
Hmm.
across backgrounds, across people. There's nothing genetic about chutzpah, and age isn't a factor. Your dad at 14. I do have a story in the book about somebody who was 10. Now, that person also had help from his father, but we might get to that in this interview as well. Let's go back to something earlier about is chutzpah good or bad?
Hmm.
I look at chutzpah as a skill set. And a skill set usually combines various behaviors, abilities, things that we practice, that we work on. Maybe we're better at some more naturally. Some people are more mechanically inclined. Some people are more mathematically inclined. Doesn't make a difference. We find our strengths. But as a skill set, I'll give you a good example. I just mentioned somebody who might be more mathematically inclined, might decide I'm going to take some courses in computer programming and see what I can do with that. Well, that class is filled with people. This person, upon finishing the courses, getting a degree, a certificate, more importantly, getting the skills, advanced skills in computer programming, might decide to work on algorithms related to healthcare
Hmm.
or software that increases productivity for businesses, or an application that makes our lives better as we go about our daily business, a calendar app or something else. Or they can use their skills to create ransomware,
Right.
which steals from people, destroys their data, their computers, wreaks havoc on individuals and companies. Now, the skill set is the same.
Hmm.
It's how somebody chooses to implement. And chutzpah is like that. You can learn these things and use them for not constructive results. You use them actually in a way that's very destructive.
Yeah.
So that gets into my thought about the good and the bad. Uh, it's interesting as well as I interviewed people, a handful of people, when I asked about chutzpah, mentioned family members. You were one of the few. But the ones that I remember the most are people who talk about their family members, because then you get a sense for the difficulties, the struggles, the areas we had to overcome to get to where we are today.
Hmm.
Those are the stories I remember the most. So,
Interesting.
let is there somebody you can think of who's a good example of no chutzpah at all? This person doesn't have any of it. I need something done. I'm not going there. You don't have to give me a name. I don't want to get personal. Unless if we're talking about politicians, but then this is going to run way longer than an hour if you start doing the no chutzpah type people. So
I mean, they got to have some to want to run for office, right?
they do. You're absolutely right. So obviously I tease because that's what politics are for.
Yeah. Accomplish little else. Uh, yeah, I can think of a couple people in my life that have been that way, and you know what I find is that um, I find them to be energy parasites. Uh,
Mhm.
to me,
A very good point.
they suck my own desire and drive and energy, and I feel like I just have to work twice as hard, and so I tend to avoid people like that.
Right.
Um,
Let's get to the chutzpah model. So I'm going to ask our audience once again to get involved here. And since they're viewing it at different times, and again, as I said, sharing it with tens of thousands of their closest friends,
Tens of
because
thousands, hundreds
right,
of thousands.
what I'd like them to do, and you may even want to do this too if you have a sheet of paper and a pen or a pencil near you, draw a circle on the sheet of paper, and you don't have to do it. You're busy. You've got questions, but on the positive side, you'll be able to review this quicker than anybody else.
Yeah, no, I got it. I'm doing it. Let's do
Take
it.
that circle, and now let's divide that into 8 equal sections, like a pizza pie. So think of 8 slices. of pizza.
That would be 4 lines, 4 diameter lines across.
Okay, I can see here that we have somebody who's very detail oriented, right? You don't want to put the 8 lines parallel to each other because it'd be a very funny looking pizza. Okay, once you have the the pizza style approach, let's put in the letters C, H, U, T, Z, P, A, H. We've basically spelled out chutzpah. And I did it this way because I want this model to be memorable to people so that they don't have to think back, boy, I remember that chutzpah guy, and he had some good thoughts, but I really don't remember the whole model. This will help you remember the model. Not that everything's going to apply to every listener. And I don't even want you to think about all of these things, as we'll get to later. But let's start with that C, the first letter in the word chutzpah. You described your grandfather being in a, not really a prisoner of war camp. It was really a work camp in Cuba, and with some others. And they knew that things were not looking good because they had worked against the Castro regime and their future was very uncertain.
Yeah.
So as they sat during their non-working hours together and huddled and thought about the future, numerous ideas came up. One of them, which they ended up doing, was let's build a raft and flee this land. Now, it's not a land that we hate. It happens to be a land that we love. We're Cuban, but we can't live in this scenario. And we're going to try and find a better place. And America, what is it, 90 miles off the coast?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Is our destination. Now, I can almost guarantee you that a very high majority of the other prisoners in the camp were thinking the same thing. They're thinking, how do we get out of this? Maybe the right person will let us out, or we'll get lucky and we'll pledge allegiance to the new government. But a lot of them were thinking, how do we get out of here? What can we do? So the first, I guess, the beginning of chutzpah is an old Latin term. Today, we call it just do it, right? Nike's brand.
Carpe diem.
But right, carpe diem. Okay, the C stands for carpe diem. Just seize the moment, seize the opportunity. Well, they created an opportunity where they could build this raft, obviously in secret. It's probably underbrush, and it's my imagination now taking this story to a different level. But I'm sure a lot of this is what happened. And they probably set out, I'm going to assume it was at night. Do you know the story?
Yeah, it was at night. Yep.
Okay. Because under cover of darkness makes the most sense.
Right.
So we think of that, and of those prisoners, who actually did it? Who seized the moment?
Yeah.
A lot of people had the idea, I'm sure of it, but very few people did it. Your grandfather did it. And through good fortune, good luck, they arrived somewhere off the coast of Florida, right? Okay, so that's the first one. So if we think about our own lives and things that we've been thinking of doing that we believe will make a difference in our lives, and it doesn't have to be as big as fleeing a communist regime, although that's extremely big. It could be, my health isn't as good as it should be. I want to lose 15 pounds. It's the beginning of the year. I have a new resolution. This is what I'm going to do. Okay? So your grandfather did it. Unfortunately, and I'm speaking for myself here, I gave up too quickly on that 15-pound resolution. But that's another story. Okay? So, but there's a lesson here. And that is carpe diem is not a go 6 days and then get swayed by a good-looking slice of New York cheesecake and say, oh, I can probably have this, I'll be okay, because you can't.
Yes.
Okay?
Just one.
Carpe diem has to become part of your life. Just one. I mean, one whole cake. That's what you're talking about. Oh, you clearly you understand my problem.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Carpe diem, when it becomes part of your life, when it becomes a daily activity, it doesn't have to be the same thing you're doing, but it enables you to take strides that you weren't taking before. You're making progress that you weren't making before. Because ultimately, I don't know if it's we're built to procrastinate. We're built to put things off. That's how our mind works because, well, I have sacrifice or I have pleasure. I'll take the immediate gratification or I'll put something off. I'll go to school for an education. I'll commit another 4 years of school as opposed to getting a job now and having some money and I'll buy myself a car.
Mm.
One is delayed, one is immediate. If you choose carpe diem, the opportunity, it doesn't not necessarily an easy road because you have to reinforce yourself repeatedly. You have to give yourself, you have to remember what's the carrot that I'm holding out for. So that's that first step.
You know,
You
you mentioned that, and it immediately my mind goes to something. I can't remember when I heard it, but it was many years ago. I feel it was an authority figure in my life, and I just can't click. But he said, "All of the best things in life are the hardest to get." Right, and um, I think about like, and maybe it was in Ranger School, accomplishing that and getting through that. And it was always like, oh, I'll quit tomorrow. We'll make it through today. I'll just quit tomorrow. We made that promise every single day until we graduated, right? Like, oh, I'll just quit tomorrow. Some people don't. Some people are approached it differently. But you look at like marriage, I think of my grandparents who were married 70 some odd years. These are my mom's parents. um
Mhm.
that's a lot of work. That's a lot. That's a daily commitment like you're talking about. But man, you can't get the rewards of a relationship without that kind of long term. Those are the things that are the highest value and require the most effort, and they tend to be the greatest rewards as well, in my so I feel like as my life has gone, and I'm hearing you say this and I'm thinking it's the same thing. It's coming back that that commitment, that's where you're going to find the delayed gratification and satisfaction, and not spending all my money, so I've got lots of money left over. And yeah,
Okay. So we're in agreement, at least on the first behavior,
we are. Yeah.
the carpe diem. Very good.
Absolutely.
Let's think. Somebody, I'm trying to think of another. Well, actually, one of the stories I tell in my book in regard to carpe diem, which might interest our audience, is about a woman who had a learning disability for which she was teased and bullied. Um, Growing up in New York, in her early 20s, she probably, by her own admission, name is Barbara, by the way, um, had about 20 jobs from uh, waitressing to real estate to administrative, anything that a typical person growing up at that time in New York City might have. Well, a stroke of good fortune. Her boyfriend at the time, realizing that she wasn't crazy about the waitressing job and spoke about how she enjoyed real estate, because real estate she saw was a way not to just make a living, but a way to become wealthy. Said, I'll tell you what, $1,000, we start a company. I'll own 51% because I'm the financial partner, and you're the operating partner at 49%. So they
Okay.
start this company, and she's one really working it full time, and it grows. And the commissions, the profits are reinvested in the company, and it grows some more. Well, 7 years later, I believe it was 7 years, the boyfriend comes to her with I guess a very unexpected statement, and he says, "I'm marrying the receptionist." Yeah, I know, eyebrows raised. I'm marrying the receptionist. Now we can keep the company going, or we can just split it up. And she says immediately, we're going to split it up.
Yeah,
I'm not
absolutely.
going to work with you.
Yeah.
Carpe diem. So it's kind of like a game of pickup basketball. Well, I choose this person and I choose this person. That's how
Right.
they split up the company. And his parting words were, you're never going to make it without me. Okay. Well, of course, we know that one of the best motivators for us is proving somebody else wrong. Okay. Well, Barbara's company grows. She starts doing data collection and analysis of real estate trends in New York City.
Mm.
And however many years later, the company is sold for $66 million. We know the Corcoran Group and
Yeah,
Barbara Corcoran
I figured it
from,
out. Yeah.
uh-huh. So now the story doesn't start there. I said that Carpe Diem has to be repeated.
Mhm.
Okay, it becomes part of one's personality. So I can't even begin to imagine all the times once she started the company where she had to follow this principle, this behavior. But years later, company, and she started other companies at the time too. She gets a call from producers of a TV show, and it's going to involve a number of senior business executives with money who have the opportunity to invest in other people's ideas. This Shark Tank. This was
Right.
the beginning. And she immediately accepts. She thinks it's a great concept. She wants to do it. A month before production is supposed to start, she gets a message. We've decided to change our roster of sharks, and you will be a fill in shark. We're going with another woman.
Mm.
She wrote the best follow up letter that I have ever seen after a rejection. In essence, you can call it a sales rejection. I believe you can find this either on her website or on LinkedIn, but it is worth looking up. But in essence, she said, look, I'm flying out. And not only will I be the better shark, I will probably be better than most of the men you have on your panel. Okay. I mean, three cheers for Barbara Corcoran
Mm.
for setting this example. Well, of course, she gets the job. They decide to take her because she followed through, that sees the day. Even though it seemed like that opportunity was being taken away from her, she didn't give up.
Mm.
Okay. I tell you what, we've got this chutzpah wheel. You filled in the carpe diem. Which of the letters do you think you want to go with? This is not scripted, obviously.
I don't
So,
know. Let's. I want to. You know what? I'm going to do it purely out of curiosity. What did you do with the Z?
oh, the Z. This is an interesting one. Um, give you a good example. There are, I've just written a book called The Chutzpah Advantage. It will be out in April, about the time that, or actually, this video will probably come out a bit before that.
Mm-hmm.
But the book, The Chutzpah Advantage, will be out then. A lot of authors actually face this, or at least if an author wants to go with a traditional publisher, what we used to refer to as the New York publishers, it was a lot of sending applications and descriptions and sample chapters and getting rejection after rejection after rejection.
Mm-hmm.
So in my research, there's one, what should I call it, set of books that we're all very familiar with, where the author was rejected 13 times before the next publisher said, you know, this isn't really what we do. Tell you what, I'm going to give this to my daughter to read. Since it seems like it's geared towards a younger group, younger demographic,
Mm.
and we'll see what she thinks. The worst case, and I'm not going to go who this is yet, but the worst I heard was somebody whose book was rejected 144 times.
Mm-hmm.
So we think of people who give up on the first time, the second time, the third time. So in the case of the first author, do you have a sense? Basically, it was a book, really a magical book in a lot of way that became a series and blockbuster films. Do you
Yeah.
want to get
Well, it sounds like Harry Potter.
Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling?
Yeah.
So she didn't give up, and this is a woman who was not really living well. She was as close to poverty as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
She wrote this. She believed in herself, and she basically brushed off or zigzagged the Z around those rejections.
Mm.
Okay. It didn't make a difference what you heard. So, for a lot of our listeners, if we're small business people and we've ever tried to get a bank loan, we've probably faced, you know, this isn't enough information, or I need you to aside from a personal signature, I want to attach to the deed on your house. There are all these no's, ways to say no, or flat out no's that we sometimes have to face. By the way, the other author, Rejected 144 times. Chicken soup for the soul.
Really? Wow.
Yes. And we think about that blockbuster, and he probably has 144 versions of that book out there now,
Yeah.
uh, with every possible niche that you can think of. So we think of the people that said no, and it's not just them. The Beatles were rejected by an unknown number of record companies. Oh
Right.
no, nobody wants guitar music anymore.
Yeah.
So we all face these insurmountable walls. I think of it in the book. I use the analogy of Pac-Man, the game that some of us grew up with,
Yeah.
when it was still a quarter. And you had these different levels and these things that were preventing you from moving to the next level.
Hmm.
Well, to zigzag, we have to learn how to get around to the right, to the left, above, under. It doesn't make a difference. We have to find a way.
Hmm.
Elon Musk, when he and his team were interested in developing a space exploration company that became SpaceX, initially thought, if we're actually going to get this done, we need to start buying rocket technology or rockets from countries that will sell to us. Well, the prices they were getting were absurd. So what did they do? They decided to develop their own. So here's the roadblock. It made no sense. It would cripple the company financially to even buy these rockets from Russia, as an example.
Hmm.
We're going to develop it because there's been enough work, groundwork laid for us to be able to build on the work other people have done.
But did you know that like just a couple of weeks ago, I talked to a guy who was there with Elon when they made that decision?
Wow.
Yeah,
That
I just
is,
I just published that podcast. He was there, and he talks about going to Russia with Elon to buy those rockets, and how they're in the plane on the way home decided that they weren't going to buy them, and I guess Elon says, "Let's just build our own." And his response was, "That's a trail of bodies that you've just laid out."
but see, well, one, thank you for confirming the story.
Yeah,
And where is it? I've got the book on Elon Musk somewhere on my desk over here.
yeah,
It was one of the sources that I used, but that you spoke with that gentleman, that's pretty remarkable. And this is how people move forward. And I'm not talking about achieving the level of an Elon Musk. In our everyday lives, we run across obstacles that seem insurmountable.
mhm,
We go for a promotion at a job and we get a no, 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 no. And we have options. We can try and move to another company, or we can decide, they said no because I have no particular experience in product management, for example. I come
right,
from marketing.
yeah,
So I'm going to take a course and I'm going to get certified in product management because there are companies that now do this. They move forward in that, and then they say, why don't you try me out?
yeah,
And before you know it, they have the job, they do well. It happens because they don't give up. It happens because you and I and our listeners don't live up. And I'll tell you, just the fact that people are tuning in to this YouTube video when they can instead be watching reruns of Tiger King, or I don't know, whatever else they might want to watch, there shows that there's interest in doing more, in moving forward, scaling up, as a good friend of mine says in his book.
you mentioned the product manager role. So twice in my career, I've pulled that move. So after I got out of the military, I went to go work for John Deere,
Uh-huh.
and I was in charge of an assembly line for John Deere.
Wow.
And I had had some interaction with the marketing guys and gals, and I thought that seems like a really interesting job. And I went to the guy who was in charge, and I said, next time you get an opening, I'd be interested. And he was like, I mean, you don't have any experience. I said, hey, um, what would you like? Let me work for you, just kind of a for free type deal, and try some stuff out. And so I did for him. I ran a couple projects for him and didn't get the first marketing job that opened, but I got the second one.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, and then while I was doing that, I wanted to be a program manager after a couple of years, and I did the same thing. I volunteered to lead a program, and the lady told me, she goes, "Hey, if this goes well, I don't make any guarantees, and if it goes poorly, it's on you."
Yeah. That's which gets to the if it goes well, I don't make any guarantees. I'll skip ahead to the last H on the wheel.
Sure.
Okay. So the one to the left of the C,
Yeah.
And I call that humility.
Mm.
And in humility, by that I mean um, people who understand that they get where they get frequently because of one, good fortune, but also good people, mentors, people willing to give them a shot, even if they're not the nicest people or
Mm.
they're abrupt, but they do it. There's an old adage that success has a thousand fathers and failure is an orphan. So the person who told you that she'd give you a chance, hey, if it works, that's great. We're both going to do well. If it doesn't work, it's on you.
Yeah.
So to me, humility and how it fits in here, there's, you might know the book, Good to Great,
Yep.
Jim Collins. Okay.
Yep.
And she speaks about those characteristics of the best leaders out there. Humility is one of them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's something we take for granted. There is, I don't want to get into too many stories in the book because then people say, don't need to buy it now. But the example that I use under humility, are you a baseball fan at all?
I'm
You don't
not.
have to be. Well,
Yeah.
then this story may even resonate more.
Hmm.
In baseball, if there's any familiarity, are you familiar with what a perfect game is from a pitcher?
That would be when no balls are hit. Is that
Well, no, it's 27 batters come up, 27 are out. So
okay?
there are no base hits. They
Okay.
might hit a fly ball, they may hit a ground ball, get thrown at first. Uh, at the time this happened, um, there had been about 20 perfect games in Major League history. In 100 years of Major League history, only 20 perfect games.
Hmm.
And this pitcher, Venezuelan-born pitcher, by the way, was pitching the game of his life. He wasn't a star. He
Hmm.
was a talented professional. You don't get to the major leagues unless if you are
Oh
good.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And he had gone through the first 8 innings, 24 batters in a row. And now the ninth inning starts. And the fans are up. They're cheering. They realize they might be witnessing history.
Hmm.
I've been to a lot of baseball games. I've never been to one that I would say was historic. Well, maybe Willie Mays' first game as a New York Met.
Hmm.
That's one game I'd say stands out because he had a home run in the ninth to win it, and he had just been traded to the Mets. So that was extremely memorable.
Hmm.
But this was a perfect game. And he gets the first batter out. There are two more left.
Hmm.
Gets the second batter out, down to the last one. Fans are looking at each other. They can't believe it. You think about the pressure on the pitcher. You think
Jeez.
about the pressure on the batter. You think about the pressure on the umpires.
Hmm.
Everybody watching, the people who the announcers.
Yeah.
Well, it's a ground ball hit towards the first base side that draws the first baseman off of the bag. The pitcher, Galarraga, he runs to first and covers first the way he's supposed to. The first baseman throws the ball to him in time. Galarraga's arms are starting to be raised, and the umpire says, safe.
Hmm.
Right? So we think now about these very talented athletes,
Hmm.
so many of whom have had, I'll say, lives where they were held in a different esteem because of their athletic skills.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they, no problem getting a date for prom, not like me, for example. No problem at all for these people. Anything they wanted. They were treated differently in high school. Maybe they had college scholarships. Now, again, this professional is from Venezuela, very different upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
But we think of the talented athletes. We think of the ones that curse at the referees. We think about when violence sometimes erupts because a call doesn't go the right way.
Mm-hmm.
We think about people kicking dirt on the umpires and the four-letter words flying, the questioning of the
Yeah.
of the umpires, the referees' ancestry,
Mm.
right? Oh no, you son
Yeah.
of a! It's not possible. Um, Armando said, "I was here," and the umpire Jim Joy said, "No, safe." That's how I saw it. Now, this was the day in the days before instant replay was allowed to overturn. So
Mm.
they had the replay, and in the booth, the television booth, they could see that the batter was out, that
Mm.
the umpire had blown the call, but there was no mechanism in place to say, hey, let's check, let's get proof from the videotape. So Armando took the ball, didn't curse, didn't do anything untoward, took the ball, went out, got the last guy out. So
Hmm.
it was a very nice one-hit shutout, not in history, no longer a perfect game.
Hmm.
Well, back in the locker room, Jim Joyce immediately asked to look at the replays, and he sees he messed up. His error cost this young man, this professional, his place in history, in the history
Hmm.
books.
Yeah.
It just, and he feels terrible. And he actually asks, because one of the managers, I think from the Detroit Tigers, comes in, says, can you send Galarrago in? Galarrago, I need to speak to him. The pitcher comes in, they hug each other, and the umpire says, I blew it. I messed up. He apologizes in English and Spanish. I don't know how I can make this up. I'm just so sorry. It can't be made up.
Hmm.
And Galarrago says, it was a mistake. We're all human. And nothing beyond that. That's humility. And
Yeah.
it plays out the next day as well, because the next day Galarraga brings the lineup to who's the home plate umpire, and the umpire is shifted over. It is now Jim Joyce, and Joyce is in tears on TV as he takes the card and
Hmm.
apologizes again profusely. But they ended up writing a book together
Really?
called Nobody's Perfect,
Huh.
which I think is a wonderful statement and way for us to think when we mess up, to recognize we've messed up and truly apologize. Don't avoid the results of what we've caused.
Hmm.
Try and fix it, but also acknowledge, because that's critical to heal. And
Yeah.
then also for the person who's been hurt, in this case Galarraga, to be able to say, look, we're human,
Hmm.
don't worry about it. To forgive is also a part of chutzpah. And that's the
Absolutely.
second age.
That's a much harder thing to do than to get angry. Uh,
Yeah. Yes.
Anger is easy. Uh, that's forgiveness is a much harder emotion, and to me, it requires more courage.
Uh-huh.
Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. No, it's easy to get angry. It's easy to lash out, or because we're responding to those kind of baseline emotions.
Right.
But having the internal fortitude to rise above that and to basically go against the natural tendency and desire, well, that goes this is the whole thing, right, all the way back to the very beginning of not eating that slice of cheesecake. And it's
Hey, look, give me a break already. It was one slice.
hmm, those great things is fighting that sort of baseline,
Yeah.
your animal instinct. Oh.
Yeah. You're right. Well, the book, as I said, we have the 8 behaviors. There are also 6 different types of chutzpah that I've identified. Um, and it's important to understand the difference. Uh, I'll give you one quick analogy there. What's, from a chutzpah standpoint, what's the difference? Should I go here?
Uh-oh.
uh, no, well, okay, let's do it this way, because this is legit. A lot of people would not think of Mother Teresa as somebody with chutzpah.
Hmm,
I completely disagree. When
absolutely.
I think of her actions, what she did to provide services, healthcare, food, love to people who were being ignored by others, and how she had to build up this organization. Remember, she was a nun, and the hierarchy was all males. So
Hmm.
she had to prove herself, be effective, raise money.
Hmm.
She had chutzpah, and her chutzpah is a type that I call other serving chutzpah. It was driven completely about the idea that I am here to provide service to others, to
Right.
enable others to move forward. And we don't have to be Mother Teresa to have other serving chutzpah. We can serve on boards of local nonprofits that provide food for people who don't have enough food. We can work in soup kitchens. We can we can coach sports teams for kids who would otherwise not have an opportunity to play.
Mm.
That's other serving, as an example. But in regards to the 8 behaviors, getting away from those 6 types again, we've gone through the carpe diem, we've gone through the zigzag, we've gone through one of the H's, which is the humility. What other one might you like to talk about?
No,
This is like Jeopardy. Okay, I'll take what's behind door Z.
what is it? It's Trivial Pursuit because it actually has the little pie, you know.
Oh, okay.
Which, by the way, also on this little pie chart thing, very genius on your part with doing a visual representation of what you're talking about. I've done a lot of memory stuff in the past, and one of the things you do is you create these visual cues in your head, so you can remember long lists of stuff.
I,
Um,
I appreciate that. I'd love to say that I did it purposely, but again, just like the cheesecake, I was thinking of pizza. So there's this pattern, there's this theme. That's part of our discussion here. That's food related.
so
That's
let's do
probably
let's do
because we're members of the tribe. So
okay.
food, right? We got to that earlier.
Yeah.
Food is part of our both our cultures.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So let's go with T, and I'll keep my the little the or geographic
Okay.
representation there.
T stands for a behavior, a type of person who does not fear failure, who is willing to take the criticism that others shy away from. T is a trailblazer. Okay? So, who are trailblazers that we can think of in our lives? Maybe we are in some way in our history, in terms of companies. Let's look at some trailblazers. Let's take a company now because you have a lot of businesses on here. If you are a small business owner, you are very likely going to score highly on this trailblazer trait.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yep.
not that you're necessarily doing something completely unique. You might be, but you're not worried about failure. You probably are worried about failure, but you're willing to take a calculated risk because you're saying, I believe I can provide a better service, a product that meets more needs, or something completely new that people don't have.
Mm.
Uber is a good example of trailblazing. When this whole concept of ride sharing came about, there was no lack of transportation opportunities. There were taxis you could hail on the street. There were taxi and limousine services you could call and arrange to be picked up, meet you at the airport, drop you off. There was public transportation, depending on where you live, buses, both inner city and inner city. There were trains. Having grown up in New York, I was very familiar with the subway and all those joys. They were available. We always had ways to get from one place to another. And of course, we also had our own cars. So we wanted to meet a bunch of friends for dinner. One person might say, I'll tell you what, I'll drive and I'll be the one that doesn't drink. I'm assuming a responsible party here. Well, what Uber didn't provide was just an option. They provided an opportunity for people to say, I have the convenience of picking up my cell phone wherever I am, not thinking ahead 2 days to order a place,
Mm-hmm.
and using an app, reach out and arrange for a car to come here and safely transport me back to my home or
Mm-hmm.
to some place where I'm meeting somebody or work, whatever it is. So it wasn't again that there are too many options out here. Matter of fact, when Uber first went out looking for money, and some of the private equity firms were comparing this, it's my understanding that one of the PE firms brought in a very well respected professor, an economist, somebody who was familiar with business, to look at this plan. And the report back to the PE firm was, I don't see how Uber will ever achieve the success that they're talking about, which, by the way, was very modest relative to the success they actually achieved. But that person started with this as a basis. I've looked at all of the public transportation and available transportation from taxi and limousines and cabs, and the entire market is X. and they think they're going to have a valuation that's a multiple of X. Well, at best, even if they got half of all of this business, they'd be a fraction of X. What the person didn't consider was that no, you're looking at an existing market. What Uber did was expand that
Correct.
market.
Yep.
People were able to say, I can now, instead of being the designated driver, I can have a drink, maybe
Mhm.
two with my friends when we go out, and get home safely.
Right.
I know that I can get from place to place without having to worry about parking.
Right.
So that's an example of being a trailblazer
Yeah.
on the consumer side.
I don't know that I would ever, and it's not a ding on professors. If I wanted to learn something, that's who I talk to. But if I want to start a business, that's not who I talk to. Right. If I want to talk about potential in a marketplace of a business, I'm going to look for somebody who invests in businesses or that has built them. I don't know. That's, to me, that's because you see the world differently. You don't see it as it is, but as what it could be. Look at a guy like Gary Vaynerchuk, who he's Elon Musk. These are folks that are futurists, right? Like they can fast forward understanding the fundamentals of human behavior and why people pursue certain actions and see what isn't there yet, and what the possibilities are in the marketplace. And that's the type of person that I'm going to look at when picking out who's going to start a business. I'm not going to a guy who's going to look backwards and be a professor, and
No,
uh,
and again, there's nothing wrong with professors. By the way, you mentioned Gary and Elon, two people who I admire, and I'm sure they're going to be watching this videotape. Please reach out to me. I'd love to interview you both. So don't hesitate. I tremendous admiration for you. By the way, along with this whole thought as to the experts are frequently wrong because the experts have a different vision. And sometimes we make the mistake of thinking, well, we have to ask our customers. And if our customers don't want it, it's because it's not needed. No, sometimes our customers don't have the vision. There's that I think it's a Henry Ford quote.
if I gave them what they asked for, they would have had a faster horse.
Exactly. Right. So sometimes you say they think they know what they want,
Eh,
but I'm going to provide a solution. I'm going to do something better that they hadn't considered, and they will adapt.
Yep.
I think it was the president of Microsoft at the time. I don't remember the gentleman's name now. We're not talking about the founder.
Hmm.
And oh, I apologize. This is a mental block at the moment. I should
Bill
know this.
Gates.
Not Gates. He found it, but it was the president at the time. He ended up also, I think, owning the Seattle Supersonics or moving on to sports. Uh, the name will come to me as soon as we hang up, or people will start telling me, "Hey, Mason, come on, you're a business guy. You should know this. I should know this." So my apologies to the audience. Maybe we should just delete this whole segment, but since we can't, anyway. So the iPhone comes out, or there's the iPhone comes out, and the cell phones at the time, if you remember, had little keyboards,
Mhm.
clickable keys.
Yep.
I remember all my early cell phones had it. And
Yep.
his thought was people will never accept the iPhone because there's no keyboard
Yep.
that provides the tactile feedback.
Yep.
He was wrong.
Yeah. I was a late adopter to the iPhone for that reason.
Okay.
'Cause I did
Um,
prefer my but then again, I was also typing a lot without looking at the phone.
okay.
Uh,
Well, I also was not one of the early adopters on the iPhone too.
yeah.
I waited a while before moving over to that, thinking, I don't know, is this how I want to enter my information? But also, I had a flip phone.
Yeah.
So this was the type of phone where if you flipped it too hard, the top piece came off completely and it was held together by wires that I would tape. So,
So I like that a lot, the trailblazers, and I feel like I've known a few in my life, and those are certainly the people that I like to surround myself with. Um, Somebody you know, um, they're gonna push me. I talked about the energy parasite, and this is the type of person that I find to be very motivating to be around. Um, and my wife sometimes has to hold me back because I want to do a lot more. And I talked to a guy just recently for this same podcast who's got like 5 different businesses, and I know that given the opportunity, I would do the same. Right? Like there's a lot of things that I'm interested in, and a lot of things that I think is cool, and I want to play in, and I want to be an angel investor, and I want to do the real estate thing, and I do this cost reduction business, and I do this podcast, and I've written books, and like, woo, doing the same thing. But I don't know. That to me, in my book, I talk about crazy, scary goals, and those are the things that motivate me personally. Maybe not other people, but to me, having that kind of that wild Mount Everest goal out there is the one that keeps me getting better little by little by little every day.
By the way, you implied that your wife in some way doesn't always support or question some of these things. That's a critical role she's playing, and it relates to one of the other chutzpah behaviors.
Yeah.
Okay, because sometimes people like you and I and a lot of our listeners, we get excited about something, and we have this vision, this macro side, but we don't look as carefully at the, well, how are you going to handle operationally this, this, and this? That's where we need people to challenge us.
100%. Absolutely.
So what she's doing is great. So what is the rule that, or what's the behavior? Now, again, still on the chutzpah rule, let's go to the H that's to the right of the C, the first one. It's handling objections. Okay, we have to understand that even good ideas, but especially bad ideas, if we don't get the objections to make our idea better, we're going to fail. If we get objections and then say, ooh, you're kind of right, I guess I should just abandon an idea, then you definitely fail. So we need to learn how to handle them by improving the idea, or by also basically moving beyond the naysayers. There's some people who are so risk averse that it doesn't make a difference how good the idea is. They're not going to be on your side. They'll be, in their mind, I'm trying to offer sage advice and wisdom right now, but you keep handling my objections. Well, that's because I'm trying to come up with something better.
Right.
And because I'm committed to going further. Yeah. So that was that second H. So now we've got the C, the H, the Z, the T, the Z, and the last H. How are we doing time-wise? Because if we don't finish, we're going to make an offer to your audience to get the entire circle completed. I'll provide it to them for free. All I need is I'll share my email address. And I'll let you know. Yeah. And again, there still are the 6 types of chutzpah too.
Yeah.
Which are not part of this.
Well, I mean, if they want the whole thing, they should be getting the book. So A, and for anyone who's never written a book, I don't think you understand the level of effort versus the at least the financial reward that you get. And I'm doing air quotes here, the financial reward. As somebody who's written 2 books, could never, at least right now. I mean, certainly that not everybody's J.K. Rowling, right? There's one of those. And there are hundreds of thousands of others that are I mean, the book is not the end goal. But every one of you, every book sold is always a mini celebration. And the author pays attention to that. I can promise you, every single time one is sold, there's a little celebration. So yeah, for people to take the time, actually purchase it and read it. It's not a big commitment on your end. It means a huge amount for the person that spent months putting those thoughts and ideas together.
It's actually a good point. I like the mini celebration because it is true. Because people buy and refer, it kind of says that, I gained value from this book. I left with takeaways, and I want to share that with other people who I care about so they can benefit. For those people who, for example, buy your book or my book, one thing I'm certain of, if they don't like it, they think it was a waste of money, we're probably not giving them their money back. So fortunately, it's like $20 of your life.
Yeah,
I don't know your guarantee, your return policy, but my thought is, if there are a lot of books on eBay going for $1.50, I've done something wrong.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. I don't get tired of seeing a screenshot of somebody holding the book. Seeing that cover, never get tired of it. It's never like whatever. Every single time, it's the coolest. And certainly appreciate it. And I think that's what folks should do. So let's just close this out here with how you how somebody listening to this, one, where they can get the rest of the information, and then two, if you're a business owner, how does this apply to my business, and how can I turn this into something that is going to bring, monetary value, I guess,
Sure.
to me.
Good questions. First, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email address is Mason, Mason, at thechutzpahguy.com. And my website is also thechutzpahguy.com. So if you reach out to me via email, I'd love it if you mentioned this podcast so that we both know that Lewis and I have had an impact on your lives. And I will send you, in essence, it's a one-page cheat sheet from my book. I created, I call it a chapter, but it's really one page that summarizes the 8 behaviors. And I'll get that to you. No obligation. I just love to create discussion. And this will further that along. As far as the people that I hope will receive the most out of this, you mentioned business owners. Small business owners, large business owners. I've had a business. I've had close to 20 employees working for me. Those have been, I sold those entities. Uh, I know that sometimes it's hard to maintain a culture of not working together. We always work together fairly well, but a culture of let's be innovative, let's be creative, let's do things that will separate us from the competition, that will give us an edge up, which we critically need. And now we're, I don't want to say we're at the tail end of this pandemic because I don't think it's the tail end yet,
Hmm.
but we've certainly made a lot of progress. A lot of companies have fallen by the wayside through through events that were not of their own making, sadly. And a lot of companies have hung in there. And there are those handful of companies that have pivoted, that have made changes, um, and have actually thrived through
Hmm.
this economy, and not because they were in the right place at the right time. If you were in medical masks, okay, you got extremely fortunate while the rest of the country was going through a different type of pain because you were in a position to take advantage of the market.
Right.
But for those that weren't fortunate, I still found companies and I still read and hear stories about companies that made a change quickly because they realized they needed to survive.
Hmm.
And some of them have increased their revenue and their profitability uh, by a factor of 3-4 times what they were by making the moves correctly. So for business owners, having a culture of chutzpah, of carpe diem, encouraging people to move along, of handling objections, of trailblazing, of humility, of sharing the successes, and not distancing oneself from the failures, because we own the failures just as we own the successes. That will help there. And again, this is small business or large business. If you're thinking, do I want to be a small business person? There is risk involved, but there's also a reward. When you pull it off, you're you're not just earning enough to make a living. You are on a path potentially to create wealth, which is
Right.
one of the great advantages that this country uh, offers individuals to get
Absolutely.
out of the I'm an employee, if assuming that's what you want. Some of us do very well as employees. Nothing wrong with that. Make a very good living, live in good neighborhoods, able to get our kids educated, the fundamental, possibly fundamental objectives of ours. However you do it, you can make a very good living and be a great employee. And if it's a personal thing, you're just not sure where your life is going, and you think of this more as in a self-help mode, I believe that these 8 behaviors will help you as well. What I'd also actually recommend is instead of focusing on 8 behaviors, after you read the book, just focus on one of them to start.
Right.
Just find one that truly resonates. Sometimes to think of, well, I've got to think about this, 8 of these things, it's too much. Just say, I like this trailblazing thing. Or the P, which we didn't discuss, purpose. I realize I don't have a purpose.
Hmm.
Do I need a single solitary purpose? Will my purpose change? It's discussed in the book. Sometimes that single solitary purpose gets you through the roughest moments of life.
Yeah.
Other times the purpose changes because as you accomplish more, you realize, this is good, but I actually want to do more for nonprofits. I want to find the right boards to join. That becomes a separate purpose. And you can go after both. We're able to handle more than one thing at a time.
Now, Mason, if somebody wants you as a speaker, is that something that you do?
Oh, as a speaker, let me think about it. Yes, please, please. Yes, that's absolutely. Thank you. Good question. Oh, yeah. This speaking is how I make a living.
Yeah.
The sharing of ideas, engaging with an audience, and leaving an audience with takeaways that can impact their lives, their organizations. That's what I live for, and that's what provides me a living. So we'll keep
Nice.
that living thing going.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming here and sharing. I didn't even realize that over an hour had passed. But I this is great. I'm certainly going to pick up the book and take a look at it. So I really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your stories. Very motivational. And you know what? I'm inspired. So I don't care if anybody else listens to this. I enjoyed it. So that's
And from my perspective, being on here with you, having read some of what you've put out there and having heard some of your podcasts before, it's a great honor for me to be on here with you. Um, you are somebody I admire. I thank you again for your service. You're a hero. And you've also turned bad fortune, bad luck into very positive results, which is critical to chutzpah. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay.